Have you struggled with trying to work out how to actually start your book? You have the idea about the plot. You know what it is you want to write. You've probably spent ages building a world and the characters that are going to go in it. But then it comes time for you to actually start your book and you just sit there and stare at your blank screen. If you're interested in a few tips on how to change that, then this video could be for you. All right, I'm going to do something a bit different today. I haven't done screen sharing since some of my lot older videos. So we're going to see if I can get this to work. Let me wait. Oh, look at that. Okay. All right. So what I thought I'd do is I have got 3 different books that are actually my next 3 releases. The Unsuitable Prince will be coming out in September. The Pointy Ears and Purple Glitter is my new release for October. And my Cuddles for the Bear will be my new release for November when I finally finish writing it, because that one just seemed to be going on for longer than necessary. But the first tip that I want to offer is that when you're starting your chapter 1, you want to dive straight in to your action. I nearly always start with a line of dialogue, nearly always, because you're immediately putting your reader into a time and place. So we'll have a look at these couple of examples. We'll move you over there. And this one, for example, is from my arranged marriage series. Why won't you go to view 1? This might be a bit spotty, this video. Just bear with me. Now, hopefully you can see that. Whoops, too far. Okay, so you have chapter 1. Now, this did come from the epilogue of the previous book. So my readers who are familiar with my stories will already know who this is about. But as you can see, it starts with a line of dialogue, and it's instantly stating a situation. You have to choose someone soon. And then we introduce the characters. We have Tristan, Lord of Middlethorpe, and Crown Prince Rupert of Cimmergile, and they were at a coronation. Tristan's going on. He continues to talk. There's going to be an annual hunt. There's a whole stack of events that Crown Prince Rupert is expected to attend. And Tristan is complaining because they're stuck in Mons. Rupert isn't going to have that. We're not stuck in here. I didn't even want to be here. Father insisted I attended the coronation on his behalf. So we're instantly, in those first couple of chapters, even if we hadn't read about Rupert in the previous book, we know that he is not happy where he is. And that is followed in the next paragraph by saying, you're not allowed back in Cimmergile until you've got a signed marriage contract under your belt. We might not be stuck in Mons, but we can't go home either. And then we have another little conflict there with King Consort Jacques, but that's fine. So what we're doing is we're immediately setting a conflict in those first couple of paragraphs. We know who the main character is, or at least one of the main characters, which will be Crown Prince Rupert of Cimmergile, and he has got an issue. He needs to find a marriage contract. And he's at a huge coronation with an awful lot of royals around, so one would think he's able to find somebody. If we go on to here, this one here is this is a Quirk of Fate's short. Well, it was supposed to be short, but it actually isn't. This is a totally different situation, but it has similarities. Again, I have started the chapter with dialogue. Hey, boss, I've just finished putting the gearbox in. putting in the gearbox. That's see, look, I found them. This one hasn't been edited yet, so we'll just pop that in the Carson's car. And then we meet Malik, who is one of the main characters. He's clearly, we're using the word mechanic. He's working under the hood of a truck. So we're already getting a sense of setting as well. They're obviously in a workshop. He objects to him being, to being called boss. And then you get a hint of Ian's personality, who is one of the secondary characters, saying, oh, my mum says it's not polite to call you by your first name because you signed my paycheck. And then says, you don't have a last name. And the last time I called you Mr. Malik, you threw an oil bottle at you. And then you think, oh my God, workplace abuse. But it was empty and you ducked. Then we get a brief description of Ian, which just works, but it's not huge. Ian is a secondary character. He is actually quite valuable to the plot, but he is a secondary character. So they're just talking about the car. Now, you might think, oh, I do want to make one more point here, because we're also noting about the setting again. Ian's talking about the truck, but then he notices that Malik notices it's getting dark. And it says here, it's getting late. Your man will have my hide if you're not home before dark. So, and then he says something about magical gremlins, but that's okay. It's clear these two have got a good working relationship. We've got the idea that we're in a workshop. We've got the idea that it's probably not in the best part of town because Ian needs to get home before it's dark. And Ian has a very protective mother, which is all cool. It's all awesome. That's immediately giving the reader a sense of time and setting. So we'll do one more example, which was my Cuddles for the Bear. And again, this came from I write series. So it's obvious that these are going to be, these quite often they'll continuation. Can I actually just mention that? When you're writing, it's really handy to write in series, because what you can also do then is when you've got to the end of your book and you've hopefully left your readers in a good place and they're feeling really good about what you've written, then you can turn around and add a hint as what is coming next. And that way, when you come to actually writing that next book, it also gives you a starting point, which saves a lot of this chapter 1 angst. Now, in this one, as I say, this was adapted from the epilogue of Sweet Things for the Crocodile. This, I didn't start with a line of dialogue. We're talking about a setting here. He didn't bother turning on his lights. The office was dark. There's the glow of a computer screen, and that's what Devon was focused on. He checked his email. He didn't want to be proven a liar to his friends, but as soon as he was done, he clicked another link, scrolling down a blue screen filled with white text. Messages he'd shared with someone with the handle Blue Knight 64. He smiled when he saw there was a new message, although his eyes darkened as he read it. Is it true you're an assassin? Can you kill him for me? And again, immediately, we've launched into the story. Devon is an assassin. I mean, it's the Assassin's Alley series, but, how did that information get shared? Why did it get shared? Who is Blue Knight 64? What's happened to Blue Knight 64 that he actually feels he needs an assassin to kill somebody for him? And you see, this is where we get into those chapters. So you're starting off immediately with something that is going to draw in your reader. It's going to draw in and have them immediately asking questions. What's going to happen next? That's what you want for them. That's what's going to keep them reading their books. Now, as you're going through these different chapters, or this first chapter, the next thing you want to have a look at is how much are you going to devolve? What is that word? divulge, sorry. So if we look here, we see as the chapter continues, Devon's talking to him through chat and what have you. Blue Knight 64 is online and he's worrying about him, even though this is a person he hasn't met. He's called Bear. I'm scared. I don't know what to do. So we're hitting some trigger points. Devon is immediately looking for where this guy might live, what was the problem. And so we're talking about, in this instance here, so by the second page, I've managed to fill in a little bit of backstory. Storm's description of him as a professor was partially accurate. There had been a time when Devon had taught classes many, many moons ago. They had basically met through a question on a private message board, and they just continued chatting on a private forum after that. Devon is talking about the fact that he believes Blue Knight 64 is a friend. And as he's now scrolling through his messages, he's realizing he doesn't know a lot about that person at all. Then we explain how it is that Devon had told him, Blue Knight 64, that he was an assassin, because apparently Blue Knight 64 had been worried when he hadn't answered messages for 3 days. And he just said, I'm an assassin, but I only kill the bad guys. Blue Knight 64 typed back, cool. That was that. But then we get the situation as the chapter is progressing. So we know that Blue Knight 64 knows that Devon is an assassin. And now he's talking, it sounds like he's really opening up for the first time. He said he doesn't have any friends. I never knew where those ideas were. He's never going to let me go. He claims I'm his possession, keeps yelling mine at me every time. I suggest going out somewhere. I don't understand why. I mean, I do, but... And he just cuts off. And this is where it's adding tension, which Devon feels. But what? But, like, I don't even know where you are. Devon, you can feel Devon is really concerned. He is really upset. And he is worrying about his friend. And then, of course, he spends some time trying to think, the guy could just be yanking my chain. I don't even know who he is. This could be someone leading me into a long-form scam. Trying to keep things a little bit real here. And, the thing is that we're getting to that point where Devon has to think about what it is he can do. What can he do about this? It's probably all fake. He's probably just having a laugh with his friends, even now while I'm sitting here worried sick. Devon didn't believe that, neither did his bear. Of course, he's a bear shifter. The only issue was that he didn't know how to track down the man. However, he knew that Cyrus, who is another guy in this series, would probably have the resources to find it. And then he has another bit of an argy-bargy. And the thing is, there's a lot of this probably wouldn't sound very exciting to somebody who hadn't read the previous books, so didn't understand the different characters. But then, and this is where we come to, he's having all this rationalization. He's thinking he should wait and see if there was a message in the morning, but there was other things he didn't understand that it was really worrying him. And then he just thinks, okay, I've got to go and talk to Cyrus. So what we've done at the end of the chapter is we have given our character something to do, and we have set up a situation where clearly this random person, Blue Knight 64, is in danger. That is the issue with it. And this is what you're doing here is then, if you have attracted your readers with what you've already written, then by the time they've gotten to the end of the chapter, he's saying he's got to the point where he doesn't care if he's making a mistake, and he goes and talks to Cyrus. So then the readers are left thinking, ooh, okay, what happens next? And finishing off your chapter the first chapter is just as important as the way you start it. If we see now this one is where I broke my own rules. with Malak, and they're talking about, they're talking about the job and everything else. We see an example of Malak using his strengths because he's a rhino shifter once Ian has gone home. Now, this was probably the most boring first chapter I have ever written in my life. And I say that myself, but it was written that way for a reason. Because what it is we were talking about Malak's living space, which I barely ever mention in the first chapter. But the thing is that what it's done is it's showing a life where Malak is very established. He's established in his workshop. He's a simple mechanic. There is nothing unusual at all about him except for the fact that he's a rhino shifter who happens to be able to lift engines out of their engine block, this sort of thing. But he's not got a riveting life. It's not exciting or anything else. And for my readers, maybe an acquired taste, but for my readers, they'll be thinking, okay, well, why did Lisa write this? Because it says here, it might be a boring life to some, he thought as he settled his butt into a well-worn hollow in his giant armchair, but it's my life and I have everything I need. That is not a hook, really, to chapter 2. But my readers will know, okay, so who's the other guy? Because how I write my stories, because they're romances and they're written from dual POV, you're going to get the first chapter is going to be in one person's POV, and then the second chapter is going to be in the second character's POV. And how it's one of the simplest ways of writing a romance is you take one character from this side and one character from their point in life, and then you find a way to bring them together. That's basically what a romance is. So there we go. But if we go back to Crown Prince Rupert, he is also, he can't go away. He's really annoyed. We hear about the fact, he's annoyed. The issue with Prince Jacques is something that it was actually in the previous book. So that was why it was referenced, and readers will know about that if they've read the previous book. Because as I say, this came from the epilogue of the Gentleman's Agreement. So they're talking about it. And then Rupert decides it would teach my father a lesson if I married somebody totally unsuitable and took them home. And Tristan thinks he's talking about a commoner. And no, that's not what it is. But, Rupert's saying the last thing I want is a spouse who's going to talk my ear off every day, boring me with policy and research garbage. The only reason I considered Prince Jacques at all was because I was told he was barely socialized and quiet and shy. And it was you that told me that. So we actually see a bit of a hint of an issue with Tristan, who is actually supposed to be his companion, but he's actually quite manipulative. But anyway, so Tristan, you need a spouse. Man or woman, doesn't matter. They need to have royal blood. So Rupert's in the perfect place to find out where that, such a person. And so he finds a thing for someone small. Tristan doesn't like that idea. And he says, they're not going to want to join you on the hunt, go camping, or do any of the things we enjoy. My point exactly. I've tried doing things father's way, but telling me I can't go home without a spouse is the last straw. He said I had to get married. He didn't say I had to live with that person, travel with that person, or court that person. My gifts just get returned anyway. So we see that Rupert is in a bit of a frame of mind. He sees a particular person in the crowd, and it turns out to be Prince Winter from Martingale, a little country that sits at the foot of the Dragon Mountains. And so Rupert says, right, he's fine. He's a spare heir. He's of no importance, no consequence. As far as Rupert's concerned, that's fine. Send a missive to the Martingale royal family in the morning and let them know I've graciously decided to take Prince Winter as my spouse. I expect him to arrive at the Simmergall Castle in 2 weeks in time for the ceremony. And Tristan, give him his credit, just sort of say, you could just go over and talk to him and ask him yourself. But nope, Rupert's had enough of it. I'm going to bed. And as far as he's concerned, they can head back to Senegal as soon as the contract is signed. So, and when Tristan does sort of say, well, are you sure he'll agree to the contract? I don't see how he has any choice. I outrank him. Even if he doesn't appreciate the honor I'm giving him, his father will. His family will, rather. And so that's it. He was mentally chuckling at the look on his father's face when he brought home a peacock of a man who would be more at home in a fashion house than the back of a horse. And I think that needs editing as well. But anyway, so you can see, this is where I'm going with my first chapters. We're getting into a situation where you are wanting an isolated scene that pretty much immediately lands into the action, giving the reader something to grasp hold of the moment that they start reading. This is why I've stressed in previous videos, you do not start with the place or the weather. You want to start with a character. And I prefer to start with dialogue because it immediately alerts the reader that a scene is happening. Something is happening. Even if it's in the case of Malik's chapter, where really nothing's happening at all. It's just a regular day at the workshop. But in each of these situations, there is something going on, and we're getting a sense of those characters from the moment the book opens. And as a rule, we will leave a hook at the end of the chapter so that we have created a situation, we have created an issue which clearly needs to be resolved, and we're leaving a hook at the end of the chapter to encourage the reader to keep reading to find out what happens next. So there we go. I don't know if that was helpful or not. I don't know how successful the screen recording business will be until I go back on edit and have a look. But I do hope that, yeah, if you're struggling with knowing how to launch into a book or to start your book, your fiction novel, just dive into the middle. Just dive in. You noticed at no time did I spend a long, lengthy time explaining the world, explaining the politics, explaining all that stuff that you've done on your world building. That will all be dribbled through the story as you write it. But readers care about characters. They care about situations. They want to know what's going on. And you'll have a lot better chance of them reading your book from start to finish if you start with the characters first. So there you go. What do you think? Was that helpful? Did it raise more questions for you? If it did, please put them in the comments below because I'm really trying to help here. I know that starting a book is one of the hardest parts. So my final tip on that would be, don't oversweat it. You said you saw yourself while I was fiddling with the screen. There's a couple of things there that need to be edited before it actually goes into the book. And that's fine. You're just putting things down. You do not spend hours thinking about crafting the perfect first sentence. As I say, a line of dialogue works really well. Even if a person was walking alone in a forest, they could still talk to a tree. But try and draw them into something that is happening that also, in a subtle way, describes place and time. And then just keep writing from there. Anyway, if you're interested in more like this, I post long form content on Mondays and Thursdays. And yeah, I answer all comments that are left of me. So whether you liked it or hated it, it's all interaction and I will reply either way. So feel free to leave your comments below. A like and a subscribe is always appreciated, but hey, if you have been stuck, hopefully this has helped. And that is the main thing that I'm trying to help with. I think I stuffed that up, didn't I? But never mind. I believe in you. I believe you can do this. So open up your new document, type in chapter 1, and then just dive into a conversation or a scene and get your book started. In the meantime, until next time, we will see you then. Whoops. I'm using 2 screens. It's all very confusing. But anyway, click that. Yep. Bye, my friends.